Alright, let's talk about some metal genres that I don't particularly like that much. I already know this video is probably gonna catch me some flack, but I did a video about my favorite metal subgenres and genres, so it just felt right to have a little bit of a companion to that. With that being said, the only preface that I will say is all of the genres I list in this video, I have artists or albums that I maybe even adore or songs that I vibe with. They're just, generally speaking, are not going to be the genres I reach off the shelf for. More often than not, if I'm just comfort listening or looking for a specific album, I'm gonna go to a lot of other genres first. So in no way is this video questioning their musicianship, their artistry, what they are capable of, their talent levels. I think that these are all perfectly valid artists and perfectly valid genres in their own right, and if you love any of them, more power to you. I give you full credit. Like I said, there are plenty of great records to be found within these genres, so don't take it personally. It's not meant to be offensive, and I want to know down in the comment section below what your least favorite metal subgenres are. What metal genres do you just not fuck with that don't click for one reason or another? It doesn't have to be a great reason. It can be the most petty thing, or it can just be something stylistically, image-wise, production, literally anything. But let's go ahead and get it started with probably my hottest take on this channel. Anyone who has followed the channel for an extended period of time will notice that there is pretty much a massive void where one genre is supposed to be in terms of coverage, and that would be power metal. Now, I know a lot of you guys are power metal fans, and that's perfectly fine. I've tried to cover a lot of power metal and like my What Your Favorite Metal Band Says About You. I don't really have any bad blood or bone to pick with power metal, and I know it's gonna sound hypocritical because I like genres like death metal and shit and grindcore, but I feel like a lot of power metal is very style over substance and just feels like a wank fest, gets caught up in feeling too serious and too pretentious, which is funny for a genre that is based in fantasy most of the time. Now, with that being said, there are fantastic power metal bands. Like, I love Blind Guardian, Halloween. I feel like Sabaton is like a crowd-pleasing band, but most of the time, if I see a new power metal record that is like 55 minutes of just weird-ass solos and weird-ass lyrics, it's coming from a place of love, because I love fantasy. I love sci-fi. Some of my favorite authors of all time are like fantasy and sci-fi authors, so I fuck with the aesthetic of it. I like the feeling of like fantasy world building and basing it on like different literature and stuff. Like, that in and of itself is very cool. But most of the time when I check out a power metal record, I feel like they are very overproduced, very hollow, they feel very engineered and heavily manufactured, and it's just not a sound I particularly resonate with more often than not. And as much as I love the fantasy aspect of it that it's built its little community around, I also like music that I can relate to, that I can resonate with lyrically or emotionally, either from a sound department or a lyrical department, sometimes a vocal department, and I feel like power metal is just that dumb fun time, which definitely has its place, and I've had my fair share of great hours with power metal, but I'm not just going to go out of my way to pick up a power metal release over a whole host of other genres that I just prefer stylistically over how power metal has sort of become over time. Next up, drone metal, and this is sad because one of my favorite bands of all time is Sun. I fucking love Greg Anderson and Stephen O'Malley, and I've gone on the record saying that when it comes to influence and how they've inspired distortion and feedback and walls of sound and noise, just auditory anomalies in music and in metal, has been immeasurable. But I just feel like drone metal misses the mark just as much as it hits it. And I understand that drone metal is supposed to be one continuous, unrelenting pattern. It is supposed to burrow its way into you and make shockwaves, but damn if drone metal doesn't get caught up in the fucking miasma of not being able to produce it interestingly or make it interesting. When you listen to certain great drone metal bands like Sun, you can see what texture and atmosphere and dimension to your music can do for something that is constant. I don't want to hear anyone say that it can't be interesting, because there are plenty of fantastic sludge metal records, funeral doom metal records, and drone metal records that do this, but anytime I check out like a drone metal release from something in the underground, it bores me to no end. It has no bite, it has no atmosphere, and most of the time it has no crispness to the riff. If you are going to make an entire genre based around the crispness of a drone, that drone better sound fucking awesome. And when you have a band like Sun that just kills it, it kind of renders everything else that comes after them a little bit obsolete, dare I say. Next up, I want to talk about noisecore. So I think that noise music does its job pretty fucking well. I've talked a lot because I've been intrigued by a lot of the noise scene. I've talked about Japanese noise, harsh wall noise, and noise in music is is awesome. I think that when it's employed in a reasonable way or creatively, I think it can really add a lot of depth to a composition if it's utilized properly. But when it comes to noisecore, I use the term style over substance for power metal. Oh my god, noisecore loves that. Now, I feel like if there was one genre on this entire list that is just one of those things where I can acknowledge that it's just not for me, it would be noisecore. Simply because noisecore is meant to be anti-music, it's not meant to be stylistic, it's not meant to be fun listening, it is meant to challenge the conventional norms of what music is, what texture and sound are, and it is always trying to challenge those norms in every single way that it can. So in that regard, the anti-music that it does, I feel like for people that enjoy noise music, you're probably getting exactly what you want. So it's less about the music itself with this pick, and more so, it's not my cup of tea, and as much as I can appreciate and acknowledge how cool noise and distortion and feedback and fuzz can be, it's just not for me most of the time. And I don't think I'm ever just gonna go out of my way to listen to a noisecore release just because I feel like it, unless it's for research or something, or a record gets heavily praised, but it's pretty underground, so it doesn't happen that often. The next genre I want to talk about, and this is probably the one that is the most on the fringe in terms of I love a lot of releases from this genre, but I can also acknowledge a lot of its fatal flaws nowadays: raw black metal. And it's kind of weird because I love bands like Profanatica, I love bands like Passage de Verre, I've sung the praises of bands like Tra. I really do like a lot of raw black metal, but I feel like overwhelmingly it is probably one of the genres outside of death metal that produces the most amount of fluff and standard bearing with no originality, with no uniqueness. And in my opinion, I think that there's a difference between making a record low fidelity and it sounds creative and fresh and cool and it adds to the atmosphere, and making an album raw but you have none of the instrumentation and none of the energy to actually back that up. And that's pretty much the hang up I have with a lot of raw black metal, specifically like solo raw black metal projects. More often than not just feel like wallpaper. They don't sound offensive. They don't sound like they have the same energy that made a lot of early raw black metal so tenacious and scary. It doesn't have that black magic. It feels like pandering to the past. It feels like it is just trying to placate the past and hold up a torch for the past. And while that isn't necessarily bad in its own right, that sort of standard bearing and obsession with the past leads a lot of these records to just lack the bite that those records had in the first place. So in the event of trying to chase that feeling, they miss the mark just as often as they hit it, because they're not doing anything to expand upon that or take it in any sort of direction. And I'm not saying you got to reinvent the wheel, but just sounding like bands that came before you that did it better than you is not going to be the best formula. Another genre that I feel like I just have not liked in recent memory, this is another genre I've been pretty critical of on this channel, is gothic metal. Bands like My Dying Bride, Lacuna Coil, Paradise Lost, and there are some great bands that come from it. One of my favorite bands, Typo Negative. My issue with gothic metal is the same reason that I like a lot of death doom releases. Gothic metal gets so caught up in trying to build what it's trying to build that you will get 8, 9, 10-minute songs that are so fucking boring and overproduced. I think there's such a thing as going so much into the gothic aesthetic and trying to be ghoulish and macabre that it feels a little bit campy, and I know gothic culture in general can feel a little bit campy, but Typo Negative showed that gothic metal can not only be sensual, but heavy and fun and well produced. I feel like bands like Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride, I've tried really hard to get into, but it's never been for me, because in a similar way to how a lot of symphonic metal bands just fall flat because they're just very overproduced and they feel like a little fake and disingenuous in what they're building, it feels like a lot of gothic metal bands are just writing to write. They're not writing from experience, they're not writing from a cultural experience, they're simply writing the music. It feels like someone making a big blockbuster movie about something that they've never experienced. It might be good, a lot of people might like it, but it also just feels a little flat and a little one-dimensional. And it seems a lot of modern gothic metal bands are scared to be very creative, are scared to do anything new or exciting, or not even like new and exciting, but just do something interesting with what they already have. When I check out a new Paradise Lost record or a My Dying Bride record, I just feel like it is monotonous, I feel like it is tedious, and that's coming from someone that notoriously likes really slow-paced music, so there really is no excuse for me to feel that way. And my favorite thing in music is atmosphere, and I plan on making an entire video about that, so for a genre that prides itself on building an atmosphere, I tend to not feel it that much. New metalcore. Can we talk about new metalcore for a second? I'm talking bands like a lot of Attila's newer works, as well as like Amur, some of Amur, but I like Amur, King 810, Cane Hill, and this is one of those things where there is a diverging point where there are some really great new metalcore bands, but if you notice a trend in those, they are the ones that take influence from other things as well, like Vane FM, Loathe, some of Tala's work, but they all have different influences as well. My favorite genre in metal is probably metalcore. It's probably the one I've spent the most time with, and I've said a lot on this channel dozens of times, I grew up with nu metal. It was one of the things that got me into metal, and so in the 2010s, when there was this brand spanking new term, nu metalcore, which was like a revival of nu metal combined with metalcore, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome, but oh my god, it's so cringy and corny half the time. I could not get through like a Cane Hill record or a King 810 record without just feeling like it's idolizing the absolute worst parts of nu metal, like taking the worst part, extracting it with the most basic components of like the worst metalcore bands and somehow mashing it together. It seems to miss the mark entirely on the two things that made those genres interesting to begin with. Nu metal's counterculture to everything, its association with the culture and community that it built up with the skater stuff and how it went against the grain, how it defined an entire generation with how scuzzy and grimy a lot of it felt. Obviously there was a lot of mainstream, but you kind of had to be there to really feel the impact of nu metal, or metalcore's ability to be pretty dynamic and versatile, clean singing but also very heavy breakdowns, and I feel like a lot of nu metalcore bands just don't have that. But like I said, there are some great ones that pierce through, like the Lows, the Vanes, the Talas, but generally speaking, whenever I hear something of a nu metal revival or nu metalcore, I just roll my eyes because I know I'm about to hear the most corny take on both genres, taking the most dime a dozen influences from both and mashing them together in the worst ways possible. I would honestly rather have one genre dominate the other in the influence than have a 50-50 split of the worst qualities of both. And it hurts me to say that, because sadly as a lover of both of those genres, I feel like that's what a lot of the music boils down to. With that being said, this is all my opinion at the end of the day, and I love a lot of genres, and I love a lot of albums and songs and artists from the genres I listed here. These are just my general observations as someone who listens to a lot of fucking music for this channel, so I'm obviously a little bit skewed in the sense of I listen to a lot of music, I have a lot of things passed to me, and so I get the chance to see both the top and the bottom of a lot of these genres that I'm talking about, so I kind of get to see both the underground and the mainstream, and my opinion may be a little bit tainted from that because I get very oversaturated with stuff, and so things can either blend together or I see the worst qualities that something can impose. So at the end of the day, don't take my word as the gospel. I'm just one person on the internet with a camera. I'm just one dumbass, and I want to hear your opinions of the genres you don't particularly like. For one reason or another, there is no wrong answer. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is, my name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.